You say you want love. You say you want peace. But if you look closely, you keep walking back to chaos. You crave intensity. You mistake it for passion. And worst of all, you think the pain means it's real. You scroll through social media, watch movies, listen to songs that scream about heartbreak and obsession, and you call it romance. But what if I told you the love you've been chasing isn't love at all? It's a wound wearing a mask. There's a part of you that keeps choosing people who don't see you, people who breadcrumb you, ghost you, confuse you, and your heart, trained in survival, calls this familiarity home. You tell yourself it's just chemistry. It's just bad luck. It's because I haven't found the right one yet. But deep down, you know, it's a cycle, a loop, an addiction to the very thing that keeps breaking you. You say you want safety, but when someone offers it, you pull away. You say you want a good man, a kind woman, but they feel boring, don't they? So you go back to the unpredictable one, the one who texts late, disappears, comes back, leaves again. Why? Because deep down, you've learned to equate love with proving, with performing, with suffering. But what if it's not them? What if it's you? What if your shadow is choosing, not your soul, not your clarity, not your healed self? And what if, just maybe, the kind of love you truly need is the kind your wounds have been rejecting all along? This is where we begin, not with romance, but with reckoning. There's a pattern in your life, a quiet loop beneath the noise of your justifications, a script you didn't write, but one you keep acting out again and again. When someone treats you with softness, you flinch. When they offer stability, you pull away. You say, they're too nice, they don't excite me. But the truth? They don't activate your wounds, and so you get bored. But when someone gives you silence, when they withhold affection, when they play hot and cold, you light up like a drug addict catching a whiff of relapse. Suddenly, you feel alive. Not because it's love, but because it feels familiar. You're not falling in love, you're falling into pattern, into the exact same pain you've always known, dressed in a different face. You call it chemistry. But chemistry with someone who doesn't nourish your soul isn't love. It's reenactment. And this is where Plato's warning whispers from the ancient past. In his Symposium, Plato doesn't romanticize love. He calls it madness, a divine madness, a state where we are possessed by longing. Love, he says, reveals our emptiness, our lack, and sends us searching. But here's the twist. We don't search for what makes us whole. We search for what feels familiar to our broken parts. So you chase people who mirror your old wounds. You don't want healing. You want to finally win the love you never got. That's the lie. You think this time you'll be enough to make someone stay. That this time your worth will be proven if they finally choose you. But love isn't proven through pain, and peace isn't found in chaos. Until you see the lie, you'll keep living it, over and over, calling it fate, calling it passion, calling it love. You don't fall for what's good for you. You fall for what's known to you. And what's known isn't always what's kind. A woman raised by a distant father often ends up craving emotionally unavailable men, not because she wants to be neglected, but because her nervous system was shaped in an environment where love was always just out of reach. That longing, it feels like home. That ache, it feels like love. A man raised by a critical mother might feel most drawn to women who belittle him, not because he enjoys it, but because that's where his identity was born. Pain becomes his proof of connection. This isn't love, it's reenactment. It's your inner child dragging you back to the scene of the crime, hoping that this time it ends differently, but it never does. And that's not fate. That's your programming. It's your subconscious running the show while you call it romance. You were never taught how to feel safe in calmness. So, when someone shows up and offers tenderness, stability, and kindness, you feel uneasy. You start to wonder, where's the spark? But what you're really missing is the anxiety you've mistaken for chemistry. Nietzsche once wrote, "There is always some madness in love, but there is also always some reason in madness." That reason? To resolve an old wound, to rewrite the ending, to finally be chosen, held, seen. But you can't fix the past by bleeding in the present. You keep choosing what feels like home, even if home was cold, distant, or cruel. Because no one taught you what warmth without tension feels like. And until you do, you'll keep confusing the pain that shaped you with the love that could save you. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what you've been doing. You think you're choosing. You think you're falling in love with someone new, someone different. But look closer. Don't they feel strangely familiar? Different eyes, same silence. Different smile, same emotional distance, different story, same ending. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. Your unconscious mind is a loyal architect. It builds relationships based on old blueprints, childhood dynamics, past heartbreaks, unresolved trauma. You're not falling in love. You're falling into a trance, and every time you call it fate. But it's not fate. It's muscle memory. Your body remembers the tension of waiting for affection. Your heart remembers the thrill of chasing approval. Your mind remembers the high of earning love. So you repeat it, not because it's good for you, but because it's what you know. The cruelest part, you think the universe is doing this to you. But it's not. It's you, choosing, over and over, from a place of unawareness. Look back at your relationships. Were they mistakes, or were they mirrors? Each one revealed a belief you've been carrying. I am not enough. I have to work to be loved. I will always be left. And each time you tried to prove those beliefs wrong by choosing someone who only confirmed them. That's the tragedy. You keep going to war hoping to find peace, but you can't heal in the same battlefield that wounded you. You can't change the story by casting the same characters. Until you become conscious of the role you've been playing, you'll keep calling pain your destiny, and love your punishment. You think you're in control, but most of the time you're just playing out a role, not one you chose, but one that was written for you. By pain, by culture, by the story your childhood told you about love. In Jungian psychology, we all carry archetypes, universal roles that shape how we move through the world. The damsel, the savior, the wounded healer, the seducer. The martyr. They live inside us, whispering scripts we don't even realize we're following. Maybe you're the rescuer, drawn to people who are broken, chaotic, self-destructive. You think, if I just love them enough, they'll change. But what you're really saying is, if I can fix them, maybe I can fix the parts of myself I was never allowed to feel. Or maybe you're the martyr. You give everything. You lose yourself. You wear your pain like a badge of honor. And deep down, you believe suffering earns you love. But these roles aren't noble. They're prisons. Bonhoeffer once warned of cheap grace. The kind of forgiveness and love that costs us nothing, demands nothing, but you're stuck in the opposite, expensive love. Love that demands your sanity, your boundaries, your sense of self, and you keep paying, because the story in your head says, one day they'll see my worth. One day they'll stay. But the truth is, people who benefit from your pain will never encourage your healing. You're not the hero of your story. You're the hostage of it. Until you become aware of the archetype you've been acting out, you'll keep attracting scenes that reinforce your role. And worst of all, you'll think the pain is meaningful. You'll think it's love. But love doesn't require performance. It requires presence, and you've been absent from your own heart for far too long. So why do you stay? Why do you return to the person who makes you feel small? Why do you check your phone like an addict waiting for a fix, hoping, always hoping, for a message that never comes? Because somewhere along the way, you learned that pain equals depth, that struggle equals meaning, that if it hurts, it must be real. You've been conditioned to believe that love has to be earned. So when it comes easily, when someone offers it without strings, you mistrust it. It feels too soft, too quiet, too safe. But safety was never part of your original love story, was it? Instead, you grew up learning that love is uncertainty, that affection is inconsistent, that being seen is dangerous. So now, when someone disappears, your heart leaps, not because it feels good, but because it feels familiar. You confuse adrenaline with affection. You mistake the high of being chosen, then discarded, then chosen again, for love. But that's not love, that's addiction. Machiavelli wrote that people prefer the illusion of safety to the discomfort of truth. And in your relationships, you do the same. You prefer the illusion of passion to the discomfort of peace. You think chaos is chemistry. You think longing is proof of connection. But real love doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't disappear to test your loyalty. It doesn't hurt and then ask to be forgiven without change. You stay not because you're weak, but because you've been taught that anything less than suffering is unearned. You think if you bleed enough, they'll stay. You think if you break yourself, they'll finally love the pieces. But pain is not a receipt for love, and the person who loves you will never ask you to suffer to prove it. Here's what no one tells you. Real love doesn't feel like a movie. It doesn't sweep you off your feet or leave you breathless every day. It doesn't make your heart race with anxiety, or your stomach turn with doubt, and because of that, you might reject it when it comes, because your heart has been trained to mistake chaos for care. So when love shows up quietly, without fireworks or fear, you call it boring. But it's not boring, it's stable. And for someone used to emotional whiplash, stability can feel like emptiness. You've built your identity around emotional survival, around managing other people's moods, around earning attention. So when someone simply accepts you, when they love you without you having to perform, your system doesn't know what to do. You start to self-sabotage. You overthink. You pick fights. You run. Because deep down, it doesn't feel deserved. Real love feels like silence after a storm, and silence, when you've only known thunder, feels terrifying. Plato's allegory of the cave speaks to this. You've lived your whole life watching shadows on the wall, thinking that's reality. But when someone leads you toward the light, toward truth, toward wholeness, your eyes burn. You want to go back into the cave, because pain, at least, is predictable. But light shows you everything you've been avoiding. Real love will challenge your wounds, not by poking them, but by not participating in them. It won't reward your overgiving. It won't play the games you're used to. It won't make you chase. And in that calmness, you'll be forced to meet the part of yourself that doesn't believe you're worthy of peace. That's when healing begins, not in fireworks, but in stillness. Inside you, two voices are always speaking. One whispers in fear, the other commands with shame. And most of the time they're running your love life. The first is your inner child, small, soft, hopeful. All they've ever wanted was to be held without having to earn it. To be loved, not for what they do, but simply for who they are. The second is your inner tyrant, sharp, controlling, ruthless. They learned early on that love is conditional, that to be wanted, you have to be useful, that affection is earned through silence, sacrifice, and self-erasure. And the tragedy? You listen to the tyrant more than the child. Every time you chase someone who ignores you, every time you stay in a relationship that demands your dignity, every time you abandon your needs to keep someone else comfortable, you're choosing the tyrant. You're reinforcing the belief that you are not enough just as you are. The child wants to rest, but the tyrant says, try harder. The child wants to be held, but the tyrant says, don't be weak. The child wants to speak, but the tyrant says, you're too much. And so you shrink, you perform, you beg. Not because you don't know your worth, but because your worth was never mirrored back to you safely. So now, you only feel valuable when someone hard to please gives you crumbs. But here's the truth. You don't need to be more lovable. You need to stop handing the microphone to the tyrant. You need to let the child speak, cry, be messy, be seen. Because until you do, you'll keep building relationships where the tyrant feels at home, and the child stays hidden, unheard, unloved. Healing doesn't look like a perfect relationship. It doesn't look like finding the one who finally saves you. It looks like a quiet rebellion, a slow, sacred revolution against everything you were taught to believe about love. You were taught that love is earned through suffering, that your needs are too much, that silence is strength, that pleasing others is safer than being honest. But healing asks you to question all of it, to let go of the myths, to risk being misunderstood, to choose yourself, not in a selfish way, but in a holy way. Because every time you betray yourself to be chosen by someone else, you abandon the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one with you. And when you begin to choose differently, everything starts to shift. You begin to crave peace more than intensity. You no longer feel excited by chaos. You stop being attracted to people who drain you. You start to notice red flags, not as challenges, but as stop signs. You begin to feel what calmness tastes like, what presence feels like, what it means to exist without bracing for rejection. It won't be easy. Your wounds will scream. Your old stories will beg you to go back. Your inner tyrant will try to convince you that you're being too picky, too sensitive, too alone. But this is the revolution. To stay with yourself, to soothe your own nervous system, to walk away from what hurts, even if it's familiar, to create a new standard for love, one that doesn't cost your soul. Healing doesn't happen in grand gestures. It happens in the quiet moment you whisper to yourself, I deserve more than survival. I deserve to feel safe. I deserve to feel seen. And this time, you mean it. Every love you've ever chased was a mirror, not of who you are, but of what you still believed about yourself. They mirrored your longing, your ache to be chosen, your willingness to trade self-worth for scraps of attention. They showed you where you still abandon yourself, where you still hope pain will make you worthy. But now, it's time to stop staring into mirrors that distort you. It's time to find a window into a different kind of life, one not built on survival, performance, or silent suffering. A life where love is no longer a battleground, but a sanctuary. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And maybe, for the first time, your why is no longer to be loved by others, but to finally love yourself enough to walk away from anything that hurts. You're not broken. You're not too much. You're not unworthy. You've simply been living in a loop that was never yours to begin with. A loop inherited from childhood wounds, societal myths, and generations of unspoken pain. But loops can be broken, stories can be rewritten, and patterns can end with you. So ask yourself, what if this next chapter isn't about finding the one, but about becoming someone who no longer abandons themselves? What if love, real love, isn't something you chase, but something that arrives when you finally made a home within your own heart? You don't need to fight to be seen. You don't need to suffer to be loved. You don't need to shrink to be chosen. Stand tall, face the mirror, and this time, don't ask, "Do they love me?" Ask, "Do I love me enough to stop bleeding for those who don't?" That's where freedom begins.